Well, great. Let's get started, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jeff Bogonic. I am with the MBA Roundtable, and I wanted to just run through a brief bit of logistics quickly to remind you that this session is being recorded. So we record these sessions and we will send out a link and post it on the MBA Roundtable website for those people interested in re-reviewing this or catching up on it. And also we certainly would love to hear your questions. So you'll see on your GoToWebinar sidebar, your menu, that opportunity to post questions or to chat. Please certainly use that function and we will get to your questions as soon as we can, and we certainly have left plenty of time at the end for Eric to answer your questions. And so I just want to tell you 2 seconds about the MBA Roundtable, and then let's get on to the real meat of this discussion. The MBA Roundtable is a global association of business schools. We work together and we really focus on pushing MBA curriculum and programmatic innovation. We do this through several major events. We do an annual Curricular Innovation Symposium, which actually just took place at Temple University a few weeks ago, and it's great to see on the list several people who joined us there. We do workshops. We work and produce a lot of research and surveys, do these webinars, and also produce some white papers. And we do every other year we award an Innovator Award to a school that we see as a leading school in pushing curricular innovation. We do this, we're a small organization, member organization. We do this a lot of partners, which I'm sure you recognize many of those names. And one of the newest names on the list is the Online MBA Conference, which we partnership a few weeks ago on our symposium. As I mentioned, our annual Curricular Innovation Symposium is one of our big events of the year. This was just recently took place at Fox in Philadelphia. Each of the symposium is really focused on a particular topic. This year's topic was focusing on building a market-driven curriculum, how to get market inputs and really putting them into your curriculum. Next year, we've already announced our dates for 2018, and we'll be at UT Austin, breaking in their new spanking new building. And we're really excited. We do other workshops. We have a new workshop coming up called Best Practices in Curriculum Review and Design. It's going to take place on Tuesday, January 16th. And if people will notice that that's the day before the GMAC Leadership Conference. So we partner with GMAC to deliver that conference, and we will be presenting this workshop in advance of there. So you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone and join us for the workshop as well as the leadership conference. And lastly, follow us on Twitter if you have a chance to follow up with news. And I think we're about ready to get started. So we've got the workshop coming up with the leadership conference, and we will be doing webinars featuring our Innovator Award winners and finalists. And if you need more information, please do visit our website. Great. Well, now I'm really pleased to introduce our speaker and presenter for this afternoon's webinar. Dr. Eric Deerdorf is a professor of management at the Driehaus College of Business at DePaul University. In addition to being an award-winning teacher, he has published dozens of articles in leading management journals. Dr. Deerdorf has also co-edited the GMAC-sponsored book, Disrupt or Be Disrupted, a blueprint for change in management education, which actually is sitting right on my counter right next to me. So I'm really pleased to welcome Eric.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it. It's my pleasure to be here today, talk about a topic that's top of mind to a lot of business school stakeholders. In today's talk, I'd like to cover a number of things. Certainly we'll cover some of the solutions that we've implemented at my institution, and hopefully that'll give some of you on the call ideas for what you might be able to do in your own institutions. You know, when we're stepping back and I was kind of thinking about the topic of the talk today, I really started thinking about the challenges that business schools face when it comes to so-called soft skill development. And, I thought it would be really helpful if we first started getting the lay of the land, so to speak, when it comes to soft skill development. So to discuss some of the obstacles that really seem to impede our effectiveness when it comes to inculcating soft skills. Along these lines, I really hope to build a case for why it's in our own and our students' best interest to direct more attention and resources to these skills. So an informal goal of the webinar today really is to provide a solid rationale that you can use to directly persuade others in your institution, whether that be faculty, staff, or of course your dean. That's kind of one of our informal goals of the talk today. So, a colleague of mine, Bob Rubin, and I have been writing extensively and studying this phenomenon for quite a while. Basically, how do we integrate interpersonal soft skill development into the MBA program? And one of the things that we kind of discovered along the way is that there really are some key assumptions that seem to block us from taking really effective action in business schools, to really tackling the soft skill challenge, if you will. And four assumptions really appear to emerge that kind of block us taking effective action. And one is this idea that our business is business acumen, direct instruction is enough, students know what they need, and students will get it elsewhere. And the idea here is I thought it'd be helpful to work through some of these key assumptions, because if we really want to be successful at driving up professional development in our students, we really need to address these key assumptions and surface them. So as we kind of walk through some of these, let's take the first one. If we step back and think, what do we do in business schools, particularly at the graduate level for MBA programs? This idea that our business is business acumen. Certainly, if we think about the kinds of skills we seek to inculcate and target in our MBA programs, our sort of main emphasis typically is, when you've looked at MBA curriculum, is really around driving up technical and functional skills. And there's a lot of good news here. The research is pretty clear that we're quite effective in doing this, which is fantastic, that we can drive up these technical and functional skills. But the interesting thing is, career success, long-term viability, and career success for our students really requires more than just technical functional skills. It requires other types of skills, such as conceptual interpersonal skills, which oftentimes we kind of put into the broader category of soft skills as an easy, more efficient moniker. And so if we think about this idea of these soft skills, a good question might be, well, how well are we really doing, right? Inculcating technical functional skills as well as these other soft skills. And look, there's been an awful lot of research around this issue. We can start with one of our primary stakeholders, and that is people who graduate from our programs. So if we go a couple years back and look at the MBA alumni survey that GMAC does, over 6,000 MBA graduates were surveyed and were asked, first off, knowing what you know now, would you do it again? Good news for us that teach in MBA programs and administer them. Overwhelmingly, high 90%, I think it was like 97%, said totally, I'd do it again. But they also ask other kinds of questions, such as, do you feel a need for additional education, additional management education? And some striking results here is that 85% indicated yes, they felt a need for additional management education. And relevant to today's talk, they also asked these folks, well, what areas in which do you feel that you need additional education? And one of these primary skill areas that was identified by MBA alum was managing human capital. And part of the facets that go into managing human capital are things such as leadership, collaboration, teamwork, communication, a lot of the things that we commonly put into that soft skill bucket. So the idea here is our MBA alumni are clearly recognizing the need for additional developmental experiences that seem to go beyond just technical and functional skills. And if we look even beyond just that key stakeholder group of the people we graduate, there's an awful lot of evidence as well around the value of these soft skills that come from other stakeholder groups. So if we looked at all these large-scale surveys of corporate recruiters and employers, leadership, communication, problem-solving, teamwork, initiative, these are always these so-called top 5 attributes. These kinds of characteristics that hiring organizations are looking for, but what's interesting, oftentimes they find quite rare in our graduates. This is both at the undergraduate and the graduate level. And I'm just showing you some examples of some of these large-scale surveys from the last couple of years. You can see they're rather expansive. And what's interesting here is not only are these kinds of soft skills highly desirable but rare in some of our graduates, they also matter to long-term success. So there's a lot of evidence a lot of research evidence that a lack of these capabilities is also a primary derailer of career progress. And I'll just show you an example of some of the things that we know from this large-scale research. So over 20 years of research by the Center for Creative Leadership, over a series of studies have sought to uncover what are the key obstacles for career progression. And these 5 themes seem to emerge, and you can see them here. Problems within interpersonal relationships, failure to meet business objectives, inability to build and lead a team, inability to develop and adapt, or you're too functionally oriented, too technically oriented. And obviously across these themes you can notice a meta theme that really is around the idea of a lack of soft skills, right? And so if you step back here and look at all of this evidence, you know, these kinds of skills not only matter for foot in the door, employability, being hired, but then they have downstream consequences for our graduates in terms of promotability. So there's a real need here. Clearly it's essential for us to go beyond business, our business's business acumen, to also include the idea of soft skill development and trying to instruct and inculcate these other kinds of skills. Which leads to that second assumption, direct instruction is enough. Look, you know, the good news here is there's a lot of good research that shows, yes, you can train soft skills, you can develop soft skills through direct instruction. That's good news for us. There's meta-analyses on this and so forth. So there's ample evidence that it can work. But it's really important to recognize when we're thinking about professional development, especially for the long haul, what oftentimes when people progress through professional development, there's a knowing and doing gap that frequently exists. And so you're driving up foundational knowledge and hopefully self-awareness and perspective change, which ultimately will lead to skill development and behavior change for the long haul. People often struggle applying what they know. There seems to be this gap that's involved. And here's where the assumption that direct instruction is enough really can get in the way of effectively promoting professional development of soft skills. Look, for all of our efforts when it comes to direct instruction, what we're really doing in our curriculum is promoting foundational knowledge. And so you think of this, you know, this can come in a lot of the coursework we might have around leadership courses, organizational behavior, communication, and so forth. But the key challenge is to go beyond just direct instruction, right? So if we think about these kinds of experiences in the classroom, at your own institution or institutions abroad, you know, students, it's very rare that they actually receive feedback on these current skills, right? We may instruct them, they may take exams, they might write papers, but are they getting direct, actionable feedback on where they are in terms of these different kinds of soft skills and what they need to work on? And the implication here is that feedback is absolutely essential to bridging this knowing-doing gap. And without this kind of developmental feedback that supplements direct instruction, we have a cadre of students that simply and falsely most times believe that they already possess these soft skills. And then they get out in the workplace and they become among the 85% that we showed in the GMAC alumni survey that indicate, wow, I really need additional development here. And so speaking of students' beliefs or their self-perceptions of where they're at in terms of soft skills, it leads us to our third assumption that some of you might have chuckled at just thinking of your own instructional experience, that students know what they need. They'll know and recognize that they need to work on their leadership skills or their communication skills. Look, there's a large body of literature on this, empirical literature of people's self-assessments around their own skills and abilities and these sorts of things. And unfortunately, the results are not necessarily promising. We often overrate ourselves and think that we possess abilities and skills that we simply do not, or others do not see us possessing those skills. I just wanted to show you a quick example here. These are results from over 2,500 MBA students self-rating their skills on 9 key managerial skills. And so one thing that probably pops out when you're just looking at these 9 circles is that the vast majority of them are blue or shades of blue, right? So clearly, almost everyone puts themselves above average here, right? And in fact, in every single one of these skill domains, MBA students are rating themselves, the majority of MBA students are rating themselves in the top 25%, okay? And just some other kinds of statistics from these data, you know, 63% of them put themselves in the top 25%, 21% of MBAs are putting themselves in the top 10%. So this is clearly an issue that's reflected in the research literature, is also reflected in a lot of MBA students, the way they self-perceive. And look, you might say, well, does this really even matter? Does it matter if they have, maybe this is just confidence, and confidence is good. Look, there's a lot of empirical research on this issue, and I'll just present results from a very digestible piece of research. This was in the Harvard Business Review a couple of years ago. The results of a short study of over 69,000 managers, and they were looking at, when leaders overrate themselves, think more highly of themselves than others, what are the implications for how effective they are? And so in this given research, there were 16 different skills or competencies that they were rated on. And as you could see, as the number of competencies or skills that leaders underrated decreased, their actual effectiveness increased. So this is just a snapshot of the wealth of information that we know, that accurate self-awareness matters quite a bit for the ultimate success of our students. It really sort of implicates that we have to try to build this kind of accurate self-awareness, and it comes through feedback and developmental opportunities around these soft skills. Last but not least, this brings us to our fourth assumption, this idea that students will get it elsewhere. And so by get it, I really am talking about they'll acquire these kinds of soft skills elsewhere. And typically when we think, well, what does elsewhere mean? We're often thinking of the companies, right? They'll get it when they're on the job, or from company training, or other kinds of activities that they'll pursue on their own. So it's interesting. I wonder what the data say here. If you go to the Association for Talent Development, formerly the ASTD, they do these annual State of Industry reports on what are the kinds of things that companies are doing when it comes to training and talent development. And if you just look at the last few years of these, say go back about 3 or 4 years, you'll see that the expenditures directed at soft skill training are significantly, remarkably lower than other focal content. For example, if you look at the last few years, most of the money, time, and effort spent on technical or industry-specific training, onboarding, sales training, or even compliance training. So the idea that they'll pick this up, or their company will make up for what we're not doing, really isn't playing out in a lot of the data. And if you also pair this with the recognition that students expect to develop these types of soft skill development while they're in our programs, you really start realizing we can't assume, this is a very problematic assumption, that they'll get it elsewhere. Because we know from prospective students, surveys by GMAC again, they have really clear expectations that they'll learn not only the technical business acumen, business knowledge, but also the managerial skills, managing projects and people. There's that general expectation. And so we've kind of built the case for why we should pay attention to this, right? And ways around some of these assumptions that seem to block us taking action. So what is the path forward to this idea of professional development? There seems to really be a gap here between what we know from research and what we do in practice, even though many of the people who disseminate and do this research are within business schools themselves. What we know from a lot of the leadership development, career development literature is that for any experience we give individuals, if we want us to really promote deep development, it has to meet 4 key criteria. We want these experiences to require both knowing and doing. So here we're talking about not just direct instruction, driving up knowledge, but giving people an opportunity to apply that knowledge. We also want to foster accurate self-awareness, which I just alluded to earlier. And so to do this, you really need to have objective information, not just self-reported information. So giving people these profiles based off self-reported inventories of personality and so forth just don't do enough to drive up accurate self-awareness that impacts performance long-term. We want to deliver an engaging and relevant experience. So here we're really talking about the extent to which that experience has fidelity, it feels real, it's an experiential approach, and it's career relevant. People understand, the students understand it's related to their career. That drives up success. And finally, lastly, but certainly not least, is our experiences need to provide actionable feedback, right? It needs to be specific, developmental, and provide guidance. And so if you think about this, some of you might be saying, hey, we use internships to drive home a lot of the things that you've already talked about. And I completely understand that. Internships can be extremely useful for development, but you have to step back and ask yourself, okay, think of the internships we might offer to our MBA students. How well do they meet all 4 of these criteria? In particular, think about the last one. how much actionable feedback are students really getting in a lot of these internship experiences? It certainly isn't going to be systematic in most cases, right? A systematic experience where there's delivering actionable feedback. So it's important to sort of realize that oftentimes internships, while fantastic, can fall short in providing the kind of developmental feedback that's needed for soft skill development. So I wanted to shift gears here a little bit, and I appreciate everyone hanging with me, is to talk a little bit about what my own institution's done. We've taken this to heart. You know, several of us have done research in this area looking at MBA curricula, and we thought, you know, we have to really practice what we preach here. And we're a rather large, one of the largest part-time MBA programs in the country. And so for us to really try to tackle this issue, we had to think in terms of both being effective, but also being efficient. And so we wanted to be very planful around how we're going to tackle this problem, and so we could deliver solutions to all of our students, which is a large number across the number of programs, which is not unlike many of you on the phone as well. So during our initial deliberations, we really wanted to have a key set of design principles. And these are the ones that we came up with. What are we really trying to do here, and how are we going to deliver this soft skill development? And we wanted to ensure direct instruction existed because we know it's important, but we also wanted to foster self-directed learning. So not all the responsibility is just on faculty and staff, but getting students to take ownership over this development, because this is key, right? This is the way the world of work works. And so we're trying to teach them, you know, you need to learn how to learn, right? And take ownership of your own professional development. We wanted to leverage assessment for development, not just evaluation or grading. So using assessments to provide key feedback as well. We wanted to support this with co-curricular activities, not a reliance on using these non-curricular experiences to do it. We wanted to be only in a support function. We didn't want to rely on these so-called extra experiences, because oftentimes that's what students, how they view these experiences. And this led us to believe we want to integrate this into our core curriculum. We wanted multiple touch points in our core MBA curriculum. The reason why we wanted to do this is because we can ensure this is going to have the greatest reach to all of our students that go through our graduate school. And this was really important to us, because when you put things in your core curriculum, it communicates value, that you think this is important to hit with many of our students. And so on that idea of core curricula, these are DePaul's MBA core classes. You can see them here. They'll look probably familiar to a lot of your core curricula. The ones that have 2 credits after their titles, these are basically half as long as the other classes. What we did is we first stepped back and said, these are the core curricula that we have, the core classes, and we really looked at them in terms of sequencing and enrollment. So when do students usually take these courses, and which courses are the ones that have the fewest amount of waivers that students can waive out on? And that led us to sort of understand when might be the best places, when and where, to implement these kinds of developmental opportunities. And so we chose 3 particular classes, one sort of at the beginning, one kind of in the middle, and then one towards the end of their core curriculum to integrate different developmental experiences. In particular, up front, we wanted to integrate a behavioral assessment. In the middle, we use a multi-source feedback instrument, a 360 survey to deliver developmental feedback. And then in their capstone class, we pair with a business simulation, an opportunity to get developmental feedback around teaming, how to drive up effective teamwork. And so we were hoping through this multi-pronged approach to hit people at multiple points of time, to get them thinking throughout their core curriculum at least, the importance of receiving this developmental feedback and beginning to apply it while they're in our program. So I just want to take a moment now to kind of show you a snapshot of each of these so you can get a feel for what these kinds of tools look like and what they provide. So in terms of the behavioral assessment that we're getting right to our MBA students early on, and I should probably mention too, these are MBA core curricula, but we have a number of MS programs as well that filter through these classes. So we're able to deliver these experiences to people beyond just the MBA students as well. So early on, we're putting people through a behavioral assessment experience. So here we use an outside vendor, Collegiate Assessment Partners. We do a developmental assessment center. It's called the Iliad. Personally, I've been doing this for over a decade now, almost 15 years, and it's been a formal part of our curriculum for about 8 or 9 years now. Essentially, this is an on-site developmental assessment center. So students come, they go through various exercises like a leaderless group discussion, they're delivering oral presentation, written assignments, and it's trying to capture skills around decision-making, teamwork, communication, leadership, and planning. It takes about 3 hours to do. It's on-site in person. While students are going through this, performance is recorded, video and written documents, and then we take that information and you send it back to the vendor, and the vendor does the scoring for you. And then feedback reports are delivered about 3 weeks after that, and the feedback reports consist of highly specific skill and behavior-based feedback, whether or not you perform these certain behaviors that indicate these skills. Now, because this is an on-site, in-person experience, it doesn't fit some of our programs and some of our students' needs, especially we have all-site programs and some students just can't afford to or can't work it into their schedules to be on-site for 3 hours. So we've begun to use another behavioral assessment as well, and this one's called CAPSIMINBOX. And this is a behavioral assessment that's done online. They use a simulation-based assessment. Here, students respond to various problems and situations in a simulated communication platform, and this is designed to elicit specific skills such as organizing, problem-solving, leading, communicating, and initiating. The duration here is less than an hour. I think on average it takes about 45 minutes to complete this, and feedback reports are available immediately upon completion. And this tool also includes a self-directed exercise as well that helps students build an individual development plan. And so just to give you a better idea of what this looks like, I just want to take a moment and show some screenshots to you because this might seem a little ambiguous. What does an online simulation look like? So essentially what you're looking at here in CAPSIMINBOX is the interface students see when they get into the experience. And again, it looks like a communication platform. You have emails, a drive file, a cloud drive file with important documents. As you're interacting and reading these different emails that present various problems and situations you have to address, you're getting instant messages piping in, also presenting problems and information to which you have to respond. And so students go through this experience. Again, it takes about 45 minutes or so. And then they're provided this customized feedback in the form of objective skill-based feedback around their skill levels or skill proficiency levels, as well as help calibrating their self-awareness. There's also developmental tactics that are provided, which I found in my own class is really helpful. It tells students particularly how to drive up their own development in these different skill areas. And again, as I mentioned, there's this development plan builder that walks people through steps to build a personal development plan. And so around the middle of the course, we also do a developmental assessment. So now taking it from an assessment experience, a simulation experience, we now try to integrate feedback from other sources, particularly the workplace. So we use an instrument called CAPSIM 360, and essentially it's an online multi-source feedback survey. And so here our students are asking their managers, their peers, their direct reports if they have them, to rate themselves on these different behaviors that represent 9 key managerial skills, and you can see those here. The survey takes about 15-20 minutes to complete. It's driven by the students. They control the process. And then feedback reports are available upon completion. Some of you are probably familiar with 360 surveys. They're much used out in industry for leadership development purposes. And just to give you an idea of the kind of feedback that's reported, that's given, each student's given a customized feedback report that's delivered online, or you can download it. And basically, it drives up not only their self-awareness of their skills, because you're seeing how well you rate yourself compared to others, but it's also given an opportunity to get write-in feedback as well from their respondents. And so our last developmental experience that we work in is in the Capstone Strategy class, where we've always run a business simulation, and this is done in a team-based environment, which of course is important because all the important decisions in most organizations, especially strategic ones, are done in groups, so team settings. And so we thought this was a great opportunity to drive home some developmental experience around being a better team contributor. And we use a tool here called Teammate. I've used this one in my own classes beyond strategy for a number of years now. And this is basically a peer ratings tool where students rate their team as well as themselves and others in their team on different dimensions that we know underlie team effectiveness. There's actually 2 components to this. There's an evaluation component that you can use for grading, and then there's a separate component that can be used for development. And developmental component measures 9 key dimensions that are borne out from, the 30 decades of research on team effectiveness. It only takes about 12 to 15 minutes to complete. And again, feedback reports are available upon completion. Just to give you an example here of the type of feedback, students are getting team level and individual level feedback. How well is their team functioning? How well are they functioning within their team? The data are normalized against tens of thousands of other ratings that are in the database, which is really fantastic. One thing I've really enjoyed as an instructor personally is the tool kicks off developmental tactics, specific things teams should do to right the ship, if you will. Since I've been using this is fantastic. I've usually gone from, out of the 10 teams in my class, there's 3 of them that are complaining all the time about their teammates or visiting me during office hours. And this has significantly reduced that because now the onus is on them. They're given to improve their team functioning, and they get developmental tactics. And so at a high level, we've kind of given information on these kinds of tools that you can easily slip in. Overall, at DePaul, we found these to be very effective. The student reactions have been fantastic. Otherwise, we wouldn't continue to use these. We found them to be very beneficial. But I wanted to kind of end on some overall things you should consider if you're thinking about implementing these sorts of tools. Just talk about some of the practical benefits and some things you should consider that could be challenges during implementation, at least things that we've encountered. So we're thinking about the ILIAD, the Behavioral Assessment Center. Some of the benefits that objectively measure soft skills. The things that, oftentimes we call them soft because people think you can't measure them. These are completely measurable. You just need to use certain techniques. Case studies really don't get at that. It provides a very in-depth assessment. It's very, very precise. It's very behavioral and action-oriented. Some of the challenges to overcome here, it's highly resource-intensive. Again, remember, it's on-site. It needs to be proctored. There's a delay in scoring, of course. You have to consider that because it's sent back to the vendor. It doesn't provide developmental recommendations. It just provides feedback. Because it's kind of a lengthy experience. It does last 3 hours. So that's kind of the trade-off here. It's highly precise, but it does last 3 hours, and it's on-site. So it is resource-intensive. Something to consider. With CAPSIMINBOX, again, it's an objective assessment. It's very flexible. It's delivered online. It has that fidelity. It looks and feels like what most people often see in their job. It does provide developmental tactics to students. So not only is it providing skill feedback, but recommendations on how to improve those skills. It provides that self-guided development. So the onus is not just on the instructor or career services to help students go through this. Students can control the developmental experience themselves. And so it can be thrown into a course or it can be standalone. At least we found it that way to be extremely flexible. To be honest, so far in our use of this, we really haven't noticed any significant barriers. I was going to list reliable internet connection up there, but that sort of feels a bit cheeky because, that goes for almost anything that we deliver online. In terms of the 360s, again, it efficiently measures soft skills. It's also flexible. The one key benefit here that we found is that now you're integrating feedback from the workplace, which is really fantastic. It's not just from an assessment or within the MBA curriculum. You're integrating stuff from outside, from other key stakeholders. It's nice because you get those multiple rating sources, and it's stuff that it's a tool that many organizations are already going to use as well. Because it's gathers information from the workplace, it's really ideal for working professionals, right? So if many of your students aren't currently working, again, it's not ideal in that situation because you're gathering information from peers, direct reports, managers, and these sorts of things. It does require faculty or some sort of career office support, right? So if you just throw students into this and they're going through it and you expect them just to all of a sudden develop at the end, that's not necessarily ideal. There needs to be some sort of faculty. It needs to be embedded in a course where faculty members responsible for this. Or as some institutions do, it's part of an onboarding experience during orientation when they're bringing MBA students into the experience, and career services is overseeing it. So about Teammate, the last tool, what's fantastic here is it gives you quantitative attitudinal related data. It reveals individual behaviors in teams. It helps teams diagnose those problems, so that makes your job as a faculty member easier if you're delivering this, but importantly, it's delivering that feedback to individuals about how to drive up team-based work, which is where most of our students find themselves after they leave our halls. And another real advantage here, this can apply to any type of team project. I mentioned that as a requirement in our strategy class, but a number of other courses use this. I use it in my training class. I use it in a consulting skills class. We even have people in other departments that use it on in their courses as well. And then finally, some challenges here is, some faculty we found might feel that teams just aren't their domain. So some of our strategy faculty were worried early on, well, I don't teach teams, I teach strategy. So you have to sort of say, look, the tool drives home the development for you, but that is a challenge you need to address, to say that's not, you don't really need to worry about that, the tool can drive home some of this development. Look, students have to take this assessment seriously, like all assessments, but especially this one, because they're providing the data. So if they go in there and rate everybody as fantastic on the team, they're not going to get that developmental experience out of it. Look, I've asked CAPSIM to run some analyses here to make sure that that's not the case, that most students don't just rate everybody as fantastic. And the good news is there is a nice distribution of scores from this, this tool. I guess one other challenge here is that so far the tool doesn't have self-assignment, so there needs to be some person that's assigning students to teams. I've been told that that's an update that's to come soon, so I know I'm quite excited about that. One last thing I'd mention here too, we're talking about skill development, but one of the nice added benefits here is through these kinds of assessments, you're getting information for accreditation purposes. On a lot of these learning goals that are around so-called soft skills, we find really hard to measure and to find data for accreditation assurance learning. Right here it gives you readily available data, and we've been leveraging these for the last few years at DePaul, and it's been fantastic. It's really nice because oftentimes these are really hard to measure when it comes to accreditation. We talked about these things being effective and some of the implementation concerns and these sorts of things. I'd be remiss to not at least leave you with, hey, these things have worked well for us. How can we make them work better, right? Because ultimately, we don't just want to use things that work well. We want to make them work really, really well. And some of the lessons learned, I'll just boil it down to 3. You really need to encourage deep reflection to have soft skill development happen, ensure practice opportunities, and really facilitate the transfer of the skills beyond your institution. And so what we've done, kind of learned along the way to work it out here, is we've used focused activities and homework assignments to encourage deep reflection, right? We build in accountability. So we use things such as employability plans, the so-called, where do you want to be in 5 years kind of exercise. We have students have to develop an individual development plan and turn it in for a grade to build in that that accountability. We've also used self-reflection essays as well to get them to reflect. The key is here, you don't just want them to look at this feedback and then move on. You want to encourage them to stop and process it. You want to also build in practice opportunities, so give them a chance to apply the developmental information you're giving them to actual course projects. So we've taken pre and post test kind of perspectives here where people are getting these assessments early on, as you could see when I laid out the curriculum, and then they can apply this feedback to other classes and projects that they have. In a lot of these courses where they're getting this developmental feedback, encourage them, if not require them, to have halftime project meetings where they step back in the middle of a project, a team project, and say, hey, we've got this feedback. How are we going to make this project work well? How are we going to apply it to the project that we're doing right now? In-class debriefs also really drive up some of the opportunities for them to practice and talk about how they're applying these skills. Last but not least, the job we're all in is really to ensure that our students have success upon graduation. And so part of this, as I mentioned earlier, is really teaching people the art of learning how to learn. And what we're talking about is the principles of self-management. And so we really want to foster the idea of getting people to manage their own professional development. There's a wealth of research on this. This drives home successful career management and progression. And so the way we've done this is, you want to have kickoffs and wrap-ups for these experiences, right? And they can be really short. You don't have to tell students exactly what's going to occur, but you should use information and present it to them and say, hey, this is an experience. We care about you. We care about your development. We're building in these opportunities to drive home the very same skills that, by the way, hiring organizations are going to want and that are often lacking in a lot of our graduates. In fact, you could even use some of the information in the slides I presented earlier as a way of kicking off these experiences. And then after they go through them, simple wrap-ups, like this is the kind of information you've gotten, and we'd encourage you, to apply this kind of feedback to your own development while you're here and beyond. And I've sort of talked about a lot of this at a higher level, for the sake of the webinar, because we covered a lot of ground. If any of you are on the call are interested in sort of seeing some examples of the homework activities, the individual development plans, the kind of wrap-ups and the kickoffs and these sorts of things, feel free to reach out to me. I do not mind at all sharing the kinds of things that we've done. Save you some time and effort in trying to implement some of this at your own institution. I really want to thank you for your attention. As I said, we really covered a lot of ground here. I hope if at the very least it was thought-provoking and maybe got you thinking about some other kinds of ideas. At best, I hope that you've seen some of these tools and thought and maybe got you thinking about, hey, this might work for us as well. Again, feel free to reach out to me if you want any kind of information or examples. I'm more than happy to talk at length about this. I'm sure you can contact CAPSIM just like I did when we were thinking about these tools, and they'll give you demos of these things. And there are also a number of webinars that I've looked at, and I've actually participated in some of them that talk about these tools in a lot more detail. I just want to open it up here in terms of questions to see if we have any.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Everybody, my name is Carter. I'm with CAPSIM. As Eric said, we've worked very closely with DePaul for a number of years, and Eric in particular for my duration here. So it's always been a pleasure to work with him and others, and Bob Rubin and others at the school. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put into it, the question pane. Also, if you're interested in learning more about some of these tools, the ones that CAPSIM has developed and delivers, please put in a comment either in the chat box or the question box, and just put the word demo, and we'll get in touch with you if you want to learn more about these in particular. All right, Eric, looking at questions here. We've got one. Yeah, who's got? Yeah, I got it. My question pane is not looking good here. Technical difficulties.
Okay, so here's a question around
what is the cost of the assessment?
Oh, thank you. So what's the cost of the assessment?
And who pays for it?
And who pays for it? Perfect. So the question was, what's the cost of the assessment? Who pays for it? So we take a variety of perspectives at DePaul, right? So with some of these assessments, it's student pay, and for other assessments, we purchase a site license, and that just sort of what worked out for us. And I know for the CAPSIM products, they offer a variety of ways of doing this. It just so happened for us that we had to use a blended approach. The site license is nice because then we don't have to worry about adding this on at all. But in some of our programs, it's just what we weren't capable of doing that across multiple departments and these sorts of things. So we had students pay. I'm sure if you reach out to Carter, that's his bailiwick when it comes to different pricing information and things like that. Hopefully that answered your broader question.
Okay, next one is, how are the instruments validated in terms of age, experience,
et
cetera?
I love that experience. That's a question after my own heart. So this question of this idea of validity, part of my training is an industrial organizational psychologist, so I'm really, really picky and trained to be a healthy skeptic when it comes to validity. All these tools have technical synopses associated with them that show both their measurement validity and reliability, but also criterion-related validity, right? We need these things to be related to things that matter, like job performance, learning, and so forth. So each of the tools that I talked about have that kind of information, which is a great question. I'm really glad you asked, because there's a lot of things that we use in business schools, sad to say, really don't have that kind of information. And if we're practicing evidence-based, data-driven principles in our business school, we really need to apply those to these experiences as well.
All right. How do you engage the faculty outside of the core courses to support the leadership development goals of the program?
Well, should we schedule another webinar around that one? So this is a great question. This idea, how do you encourage non-core or faculty from non-core classes to kind of circle back and relate this? For us, I will say we just reached out, and first step is let faculty know what's happening, obviously, in the core classes. And then we really looked at, what are the other courses where these types of skills would come into play, right? So, for example, many of them at DePaul are within the management department, so that makes it a little bit easier for us to talk about. But we also reached out to our marketing colleagues and said, look, when you're talking about marketing communication or the marketing strategy class, is there a team-based assignment? By the way, they're getting this feedback on other team projects. Here's this other tool you can use and integrate into your classes. They're getting assessed on these different communication skills before they get to your marketing communications class. So they're going to have this information, so the more you refer back to it, the more real it makes this assessment. And that's worked really well. And of course, that's just kind of cross-linking it. I guess there's probably a deeper question around how do you overcome faculty resistance to this? And that literally is an entire other webinar. Oftentimes we've just, and we know that exists, we just often go back to what's good for the student, and that's the case that you have to throw out there. Look, this is what hiring organizations want. The data are clear. We're not that fantastic at driving up these skills. Students think they have them and they don't. And oftentimes that kind of argument has worked for most of the people that provide initial resistance. They said, look, we're really doing this for the students. And by the way, it adds value to your institution. Because if you look out at a lot of different business schools, and I've done this, some of these kinds of developmental experiences are quite rare in a lot of our programs, which they shouldn't be. So there's a real chance to differentiate your institution as well.
There's one more. Do you want to
Sure.
take it?
We have time.
I
think we have time. We're getting close to our limit, but I think we have time for one more.
Here's one. I teach students at a 2-year college. Is the content level appropriate?
So this is a good question. So how appropriate is the content of what we showed at different levels of institutions, whether it just be undergrad or community college level, MBA programs, and so forth? The only tool that would be difficult to implement at undergraduate levels would probably be CAPSIM 360 that I talked about, because that's really ideal for folks that are working professionals, because you're gathering information from those with whom they work. Now, if students in your undergraduate program predominantly work, then it's not necessarily an issue, right? Because they can gather data from others at the workplace. But all the other assessments, it's completely relevant at multiple levels, right? Mm-hmm. They're designed that way.
And then we just got another one. How do you use these assessments to determine whether the program improves overall soft skills of the students?
This is good. So accreditation question, right? At DePaul, we use these primarily in kind of we'll call it a proficiency-based assessment. So we don't necessarily analyze change, although it's there, but in terms of our accreditation team, they focus more on showing proficiencies at the end. There are other institutions that I know that use some of these tools that do also take a deeper dive and look at change over time for their program. So they'll build in some of these assessments like CAPSIMINBOX, for example, right up front, and then do another CAPSIMINBOX assessment at the end of the program, which also allows not only just are people getting these soft skills, but what's really important for accreditation, it can show change, which helps get you around some of these problems around, well, what should our benchmark be? Well, the idea is you're actually showing and driving home change from time 1 to time 2.
Right.
These are great questions. I love it.
Yeah, that's the last one.
So thank you for your attention, everybody. I really, really appreciate it. Anything else, Carter or Jeff?
No, again, guys, we'll leave the chat windows open for a while. Please feel free to let us know if you're interested in the demo, and we will reach out directly to a couple people who've asked questions here. I appreciate it. And Jeff, did you?
No, great. Thank you. It was a great. You answered my question, so thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.